In this exercise, we are going to demonstrate the timer control. It will be a simple program that contains a label and a button. When the user clicks on the button, the label will start counting up from 0. So the purpose of the timer control is to trigger an event at regular intervals. The length of those intervals is defined by the interval property, and that is set in milliseconds, and 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. The event handler is called the tick event. So let's start by creating the form. It's a simple form with one button and one label, and then also the timer control. So as you see, if we place a timer control in the form, it appears in the tray at the bottom here. It's because the timer is not a visible control. It is something that works in the background. Okay, so I'm going to change the form's text to timer demo. The button's text, I'm changing to start stop, because clicking on this button will start or stop the timer depending on whether it's already running or not. I'm just going to name it button start stop. The label, I'm going to name LBL count, and I'm going to change its font size in the font property. So you just go into the font property and just make it huge, like 72, and change its text to 0, because this is where our counter is going to start counting from. I'm going to change the timer's name, the name property, to TMR count, and then here's the interval property. The default value for the interval property is 100 milliseconds. I'm going to change it to 1000, because 1000 milliseconds is equal to 1 second. Right, so now we can write the event handlers. So I'm going to start by writing the timer counts tick event. So this is the event handler that will execute while the timer is enabled. So it will be executed every second. And what we want this event handler to do is to take the value that is currently in the label, add 1 to it, and then place that new value back into the label so that the label counts up. Okay, so we're going to declare an integer count, and I'm going to set it equal to label count dot text. But now, because this is a string and count is an integer, we have to convert it to an integer. Okay, so then we add 1 to that counter, and now we can place it back into the label. The label count text is equal to, and now we have to convert it back to a string. Okay, so what this means is every time the tick event of the counter is triggered, it takes the current value in the label, okay, adds 1 to it, and places it back into the label. But if we run the program now, nothing is going to happen, because by default the timer will be disabled. So we first have to write the event handler for the button that will enable the timer. So in here I just say timer count dot start. This is a method, so we have the brackets there. So the start method of the timer will make the timer start so that the tick event is executed repeatedly. So If I run the program now, you will see if I click on the start stop button, it will start counting. Now the idea is if I click on the start stop button again, that the counting should stop, but at the moment it just continues on. It's because we haven't written that part of the code yet. So what we actually need to do in this buttons event handler is to check first, is the timer currently running? If it is, we're going to stop it. If it's not running, we're going to start it. Okay, so I'm going to say if timer count dot enabled. So the enabled property is a Boolean value, so we can have the condition just like that. So if it's enabled, it means it's running. So then we want to stop it. Otherwise, else, we want to start it. Okay, I left out the curly brackets here because we have only one statement in the if part and the else part, but you could also put that in. Okay, so if I now run it, I click on start stop, it starts. If I now click again, it stops. If I click on start again, it continues on. Okay, if I stop, it stops. Okay, so what if when we click on, suppose now we've started the counter, it's counting up and we stop. If we want the counter to restart at 0 again, what do we need to do? We just need to change that label back to 0 whenever we stop the timer. Okay, so that we will also do here. So you will, I now have to put the brackets in because I'm going to add a statement here. So I'm going to say label count dot text is equal to 0. Just make sure that that is a 0 and not an O, because if it's an O, it won't work. Okay, so if the timer is enabled, in other words, it's been running, I'm now going to stop it and I'm going to reset the text of the label, of the counting label, to 0. Okay, so I started and it starts counting up, and when I click stop, it resets it. Okay,